What's up? I'm here with a school project. And this school project is something pretty interesting because I got to pick something that I actually enjoy. It has to do with gaming peripherals. I love gaming, and the field is vast on the internet. A part of gaming is the peripherals, the very devices that you use to play your games. And of course, it's only natural that you would want to have the best of the best. Um, Here is the standard of gaming. This is a $150 mouse, the Logitech G Pro Superlight. And as you can tell by the name, it's targeting the demographic of somebody who wants a mouse that's light. Um, because in theory, I mean, if you can move your hand faster, you can outplay somebody. This is what I'm calling the Spur, also like codename Project Platypus. It's not Logitech's mouse, but it shares similar design cues, and it also has an ambidextrous design, which is a part of why this is such a popular mouse, which is also popular in esports. So I want to quickly go over how I created my mouse and how you can do the same. And is it worth it? Well, I think it was worth it because of the vast amount I learned. But let me go over what I learned. So the first thing I needed to do was do some research. What is popular shapes? This is pretty easy. Honestly, I kind of had anecdotal research from literally playing with different mice and seeing what different companies are doing and why they're doing it. And like I expressed, this is a really popular mouse because of how simple this design is for everyone to use. And you'll see it across esports, professional gaming, because it's just a great mouse. And that's an industry that is just incredibly expansive and very fiscally motivated. So if something's good, it's good. And I mean, this is good. It's got a simple design. So my mouse, of course, is like a similar copy to this, right? It has a honeycomb pattern, just meaning like the hexagonal pattern to reduce its weight. But the only key difference is that this mouse is incredibly expensive, and my mouse costs about $50, excluding like the things I had to make it, such as a soldering iron and cutters and different things that I purchased to make the job easier. Assuming you already have this job would be crazy easy. And if you have a 3D printer, which is rarer, you can maybe rent one in a library. Not a library. Well, I think you could rent one in a library. You can, certain libraries have them. You can also rent them separately. And ultimately refine your own mouse because everybody's different the way that you like it. But what I did was I took a pre-existing mouse. This is the Logitech, same company, the Logitech G305, and I strive to make it lighter because this is 99 grams and more comfortable. And ultimately, we settled on a design that was very similar to the Superlight, the pre-existing $150 mouse. That is very, I'm good. It's pretty much the same mouse, just stubbier and the way I like it. It's more of a mouse that I enjoy working with. And we cut off in that process 30 grams. So I would say it has a 3 gram disadvantage to the 60 gram Superlight, which is like nothing. But I would prefer even lighter, but I don't have time with the project given that. And my Spur might actually be lighter. This is technically not the original model. This is my best attempt to recreate it because I couldn't get the print out in time. But to create this using the components of this cheaper mouse than the one that this is trying to compete with, I had to take apart the internals and scrap them and pretty much just put them within this mouse and then design around it to make sure it shared basically the same internals of this mouse and would fit them the same way as this mouse would fit them, and ultimately create an in-between mouse. That's this, which is both. And they share similar internals. That's kind of why I was sparked to create this project in the first place, is because although I guess there's an engineering factor and maybe some things are better, overall, this in terms of like quality isn't much different at all. So for this to be $150 and this to be 30, like right now on Amazon it's $35. To me is just crazy. And this is already a good mouse, to be completely fair. But our goal is to make it lighter and a more adaptable shape. So let's go with the first thing we did. So like I said, first thing we did was research. We looked around and how to solder, because we're going to need to know how to connect all these electrical components. I wasn't messing with the fact that the original thing is actually a double A battery. It uses a double A battery. So I was like, I want it to be rechargeable. So what did I do? I thought to myself, what am I going to have to do to make that work? I want a port of some kind that's going to transfer the electricity back into the battery. And I need the battery itself to be something that can contain energy and be recharged. So I went with a 500 milliamp hour battery from Amazon. And this is a somewhat long-lasting battery, especially for the size. It was the biggest one that I think I could fit in the mouse. And I bought a standard Type-C port with this little like daughter board that would be able to connect this and transfer this out. And where did I learn that? I learned it from a YouTube video that was teaching how to convert. So I basically amalgamated a bunch of information YouTube videos to create this video here, which I didn't see on YouTube. I didn't see like a video that was similar to this that was kind of saying the whole process. So step one, research. How do you want your mouse to be? If you don't care, you just take mine. That's fine. And if you want somebody else's, Thingiverse is a library that stores STL files, the files used to 3D model, and you can get one yourself. So once you have your research done on how you're going to assemble the mouse, the next thing you can do is head on over to creation. And this is going to start with 3D printing. So the next thing is 3D printing. We're going to 3D print utilizing a software that can communicate with a 3D printer. So an STL file is a model file, right? But it does not communicate with the 3D printer. So you're going to need something like Cura, as an example, a software that will create structures that will support this and teach it in what's called G-code to the printer. So your printer will create little structures that will hold up your 3D print that will later be detached, but will hold it temporarily so it doesn't fall over if you have thin pieces. And just like, I wonder if we actually have one that we can show. Yeah, I have one right here. So this whole chunk was just to support this. It was actually very difficult to get out. It was actually in this top housing, because these are two separate pieces. There's a bottom housing and a top housing. And it was holding the top housing, so it was really snug and hard to get out. But this is all disposable. And some mice actually work by subtractive building, so additive building, not subtractive building. So they save materials because they're just adding as opposed to taking away from. But this is kind of a different story because this is for a structure. But I don't think it's as applicable for things that are in a resin printer. So what's the difference between a resin printer and your standard extrusion printer? A resin printer is going to create a layer and then cure that layer by using light, I think UV light. So it's going to cure this layer and then go to the next layer, cure it, and it has like its instant speed. Where extrusion printers are very good, like there's nothing wrong with them. And I think they can be just as fast, if not faster, but they're limited by the speed at which the printer will cool off the extruded material, which is plastic. So it's just something to keep in mind. That's interesting. But so once you print it, you're going to put it in Cura, and depending on what kind of printer you're using, you can just throw it into an SD card. So that software Cura is going to say you want to export. Once you place it, it's going to ask you like what printer you're using. You're going to physically place it. You're going to put supports on in the top right corner. And now that you have this, it's going to ask if you want to put it up, export it, and eject it. So once it's ejected, you're going to have this physical SD card, and you're going to put it in the printer, and you can actually use the menu on the printer to select it. And if it's an older printer, it might just be connected via a literal printed cable. So you can do it within the Cura software to import it immediately. So yeah, you must keep in mind that older printers don't actually have that. Sometimes they use actually completely separate, different files and folder and softwares, because older ones didn't have the liberty of Cura, because Cura like now is just like everything. It's almost like a monopoly over the printer space. It's merged with other companies that make printers as well. So regardless of that, it just has a lot of printers within its database. So you can use that to like know the dimensions basically, and then communicate with the printer. So you can create it, your file, space it how it will be spaced on your printer, your particular printer, save it, and then plug it into your printer or not. But that's the first step, really, is making sure that you have what you want. And then, like I said, I'm saying first step, but the second step now is to make sure that you have it properly printing, and it's going to print. Probably going to take a few hours. Mine took 19 hours, and it failed. And what I learned from that is that you can actually glue it. One of my friends, Philip, taught me that. I literally did not consider that. There's glue right next to it, and I never considered that you could put glue on it. And they have a heating bed to make it an easier extrusion so it stays more moldable for longer. And I guess helps it bind better. But it didn't occur to me that you could put glue on it. It would also melt the glue and then keep things sticking to it. Because my issue happened twice was I would get something that looked, can I find it? I would get something that looked like this, right? And I was like, that's not a mouse. What is this? And ultimately, it was due to the fact maybe it was like a weird misdirection in air, because it's the extrusion printer is extruding plastic that's really hot and then cooling it down so it can work at its own pace. So maybe it was just misdirecting that air, and it was like blowing it while it was very thin. Because the first process a printer will take before it prints your piece is surrounding it to clean out the extruder tube and make sure that everything is all good. So it's going to do a really thin layer around it. So while it was doing that really thin layer, it must have gotten blown up in the air and somehow attached back to the extrusion tube and kept doing that. And it just pretended like nothing was happening. And then it created this spider web of a thing. And after I glued it down, it stuck to it. So that was not an issue. So make sure you're keeping things in mind. Like, it's not going to necessarily be perfect the first time, and, you know, keep an eye on it if you can for as long as possible. So once your mouse is printed, right, you know, you're one step closer to having it. So you're excited. Take your time. Try to pry it. You can even use heat. That's what I learned, is that heat makes it significantly easier. So if you have a hairdryer or a heat gun like I do, gently put it towards the structures that are holding it. Do not put it on your actual structure, or it will melt it and damage it, because it's all temperature sensitive, because that's how it's printed in the first place. So the next thing you're going to want to look at is the internal components. So you can choose whatever mouse you desire. I chose the G305, and I think it's a very competitive choice because it's a $30 mouse that has specs that compare to the high-end mice. And to be specific, it has a like lagless sensor, like a near timeless sensor. And this is for wireless connection. So I think that's a big deal. In modern times, it's standard pretty much, but it's like the standard. So you basically have now this mouse. You take off the feet on the bottom. If we look at the mouse, it actually, you can see it has screws under these feet that I took off, PTE feet, and you unscrew it. And I'll just do it for you. Let me show you. This is where the battery would be, but we don't want a battery because it's not rechargeable and it takes up too much weight. And we're trying to be light so we can have maximum efficiency. So literally, pry this off as gently as you can, unless you don't care about damaging it, which I would care about damaging it. I didn't actually. Okay, so take off this big chunk, and we're going to be scrapping this whole chunk entirely, because that's a lot of plastic for a whole lot of nothing. As you can see, everything's connected via this main motherboard per se. I'm calling it a PCB because to me it's not really the true name of a motherboard, but maybe it is. You can see everything has headers. So if we take a really close look at, you know, what's here, we see that there's something connecting to the battery right here, which is power. These are two switches that are clicked, you know, and that's how you right click and left click. And then on the side, we have two switches that are for the side buttons. So it's pretty intuitive, and they all have their own coordinated header that goes with them. So once you do kind of the difficult part of soldering whatever you desire, which I picked different switches for mine because I was feeling like they would give you like a millisecond advantage. It's not a big deal. I just thought they sounded better. So I chose different switches. You don't need to do that. But basically, yeah, we can see like why this mouse is so simple. A lot of mice are set up like this. It's just particularly, like I said, a good price mouse. The value is just there. This is for DPI right here, this button right here, and it has kind of a spring system to press this switch that I actually removed from this one. And what that does is DPI is dots per inch, and it's how quickly your mouse moves, I guess, in that scale. So it's how fast your mouse is going to move. So if you ever have accidentally bumped a button on a mouse and now you're moving really fast or really slow, that's DPI. And the higher it is, the faster you're moving, the slower it is, the lower. But the lovely thing about Logitech is they have their own software. So I don't even need that button on the mouse, because if I go through it, it's going to select different profiles that are preset. Slower ones, faster ones, faster ones. So I'm going to take advantage of their software to create weight reduction. So that was one of my first sparks of thought. And you can do similar things. Basically sacrifice. Think of where you can sacrifice to make a good mouse ultimately. Because you really don't need anything. I mean, you don't even need side buttons if you don't want them. But I like these two side buttons. I think it's a new gaming standard. Because now you can do things like melee or I'm trying to think of what it could be used for. You can use it for voice chat if you want in a game. So the first thing you're gonna notice is you gotta get rid of this. You can do it by whatever means you desire. I just straight up destroyed mine to get to the gooey goodness. These are adhered, so you can use a heat gun to detach them gently, and then you will see that there are two separate switches here on PCBs, and you can press your soldering iron against them, and they will heat up. And you can use a solder sucker, which is a device that sucks solder. What do you know? And it creates a vacuum. You press it down, you put it on it, you click it, and you go each one and heat it up, and then really quickly put it over it, click it, and then press it down, and it will push a plunger tube down, and it will immediately suck out the solder. And then you can try to separate the switch, which is 3-pronged. If you look closely, it's 3 prongs, from the little daughter PCB that it has. And I'm using daughter as a term to describe like a secondary circuitry, or tertiary, depending on like anything, but just for any of them. But that's kind of just for fun, right? The switches on it are good. The thing that's we need to more focus on is this battery. So if we take a close look at this battery right here, we'll notice that if we look inside of it, like a standard battery system, it has a negative and a positive side. So I said that backwards, I think, but basically they're color coded. So red is always going to be a positive and black is always going to be negative. So what you're going to do is pull this wire from this and ultimately safely detach it. So now it's just a wire that has this header. And you're going to take your Type-C port, which has 4 holes, 2 for negative battery. 2 for battery, 1 negative, 1 positive. And like I said, they're color coded. So positive is going to go on whatever the red wire is. And you're going to strip the tips of these wires, twist them so they don't fray because they'll be difficult to solder. Hold them, press them down. I like to weigh it, put it over something. And then take your soldering and slowly push it into it until you form like a bead. And if you mess up, you can leave it and it'll be like sharp or messed up or whatever. And you can heat it up again and hold it in place, the wire. And the exposed wire will hopefully be entirely concealed. And you'll create like a nice perfect little bead. And that's how you know you did a good job. If not, it's not the end of the world. It will still function. It's just creating conductive like connection. But it's always nice to get that perfect solder point. And the more you do it, the better you'll get. So after you've done that, that's putting the battery basically into it. So that's the positive and negative battery hole that you have to solder, those 2 points, on the Type-C port, like daughter board thing. And then on the sides, so that's how you basically put power into it. Now, you need to be able to draw power out of it. I actually think this method is how to charge it. No. This is actually to draw. This is to draw. So then you take the plunger right here. That the things I was talking about actually come from the battery itself. You're actually going to strip the battery wires. They are also color coded the same as these are. And those are going to go in the center, like I said. And then these, you can just cut straight up. Cut and then strip the same way. And then put them on the coordinated. It's going to be positive and negative. Like whatever the device is. So it's going to say positive and negative. It literally is engraved on it, and it makes it nice and intuitive. Struggle is just the not getting burned while using a soldering iron, and you just have to be careful, and it's not that difficult. Um, yeah, once you've done that, now you have to think to yourself, how can I engineer a placement for this so it doesn't wiggle around? I didn't get there. I was considering it, but ultimately what I ended up doing is just using electrical tape. Electrical tape is your friend because it's not going to interfere with anything, and it adheres pretty well to the plastic I found, and it will hold your things together. Um, if you're not under a time limit like me, actually take your time to redesign it. But I don't have the time to redesign it. I've spent all my time redesigning. So do the best you can and don't be too hard on yourself. So that is after you have like soldered everything together. Now, this is the reorganizing aspect. So you take something that looks like this, and now you take your print that looks like this, and now you have to combine it. So you're going to experience screw holes or holes that were on the print. They're going to be kind of a struggle, so you're just going to press hard, and you might have to use even a soldering iron is what I've tried. And since it's heat sensitive, you can press it, and it will pierce a hole through the plastic, so you can make a better screw hole. And some of them work, you just have to press hard. And just, you ultimately have to be as creative as you can. And I put tape to create kind of like an in-between binding agent between some of the screw holes because they were too big or too small or like cut in half and things like that. And once I got all the necessary components in place, like the switches that will go here, prior they were up here in the upper housing, but in this new model, in this like this model, if you look, you can see these red switches. They're way lower, and they just sit there and they screw in. And you'll find that it's like the same. You're just doing it in a different housing, so everything will be equally intuitive. But it's just in a different spot, and maybe you switched out the things. And that is pretty much it. Is it worth it to buy a 3D printer? And kind of on a separate note, is it worth it to buy a 3D? I didn't buy a 3D printer, but is it worth it to buy a 3D printer and make your own mouse? Is that cost efficient compared to it? I legitimately think it is. I'm going to be honest with you. $150 for a mouse. I got this as a gift, like very luckily, but $150 for it, and a printer you can get for as low as like 200. You can get a nice one for 200 that's been used. So like, if you can create your own mouse using components and save money, and then create other things and just have fun, and you learn on top of it, like that's a part of it, the perpetual learning, and like you just want to do more and more of this and that. I think there's like a great value there to become the next corporation. I mean, it sounds like kind of bad corporate America, but to become the next corporation that actually engineered these things in the very first place by pushing yourself to engineer stuff that's more comfortable for you. Because at the end of the day, although this fits the most hands, it's comfortable for everyone. So I'll leave you with that. Make sure we're researching, and printing and engineering and ultimately piecing everything together, and you just screw it together. It's pretty intuitive, I'm going to be honest. And if you have any questions, ask them in the comments down below and I'll help you. But yeah, I was excited to talk about this and to just kind of talk about the concept of how easy, I mean, not everybody has access. Like I said, you can get one rented, or you can just straight up buy one, and you have to buy the filament as well, which is a spool of plastic that gets melted and extruded from the actual 3D printer. But I just think it was a great experience overall. It was stressful because of the school limitations, but I made the best of it, and I put in so much effort. And I just felt immediately rewarded when it was functional. And I know there's a lot of things in life like that, but this was one that I think was pretty easily attainable for like the average person. And I think I should share that with the world. So if you have any questions, let me know. Let me know if I didn't explain something clearly enough, and I'll go over it. But have a great day. Have a great night. See you.